You'll always be a burden, my sister mocked me at our family reunion. You can't even afford a taxi. I just sipped my drink. 1 month later she froze when I rolled up in the car she tried to lease. It started with a backyard, a bonfire, and a plastic cup full of watered-down whiskey. I was sitting on a fold-out lawn chair at my Aunt Marla's house in Portland. The annual family reunion was in full swing. You know the kind, kids chasing each other with water balloons, uncles yelling at the grill, and distant cousins making awkward small talk over potato salad. Noreen always shows up like it's a red carpet event. High heels in a backyard. Earrings that sparkle enough to blind someone. That day she wore this flowy white jumpsuit that looked expensive and impractical. Her husband, Darian, had his hand glued to his phone the whole time. Some dealership emergency, I guess. The man sells cars like their dreams. I didn't make much of a splash when I arrived. Took a bus down from Tacoma. My old Subaru had been in and out of the shop for months, and I didn't feel like putting more money into it. I just wanted to be around family, or at least the handful of people who still saw me as a person and not a punchline. Noreen spotted me the second I walked through the back gate, paper plate in one hand, mason jar cocktail in the other. "Oh," she said, loud enough that people turned. "Maeve, you actually made it. I figured your Uber account got suspended or something." I smiled and said, "Nope. Bus works fine." She tilted her head. "You took a bus from Tacoma?" A few people laughed, those soft, pitying chuckles that sting worse than outright ridicule. I didn't respond. Just nodded and looked around for an empty seat. "You can't even afford a taxi now," she said, like she was genuinely confused. "I swear, Maeve, you'll always be a burden." My hands tightened around the jar. But I didn't flinch. Didn't respond. I just sipped my drink and watched the fire crackle in front of me. That's been the story of my life, really. Noreen throws punches wrapped in faux concern while everyone else tiptoes around her, afraid to be her next target. She was always the favorite, the polished one, the success story. Married rich, never had to work, and made a sport out of pointing out how far behind the rest of us were. Meanwhile, I was the one who married a man who made me feel small, spent years being gaslit, and finally left with a few $1,000s, a car on its last leg, and a heart that felt like it had been run through a paper shredder. But I'd been rebuilding. Quietly. Slowly. Marta and I had started a side business editing and packaging ebooks for independent authors. At first, it was a passion project. Then it picked up steam. We got referrals, then bigger clients, and then, just weeks before the reunion, we landed a multi-book contract with a publisher in Sydney. It changed everything. But no one in my family knew. I didn't see the point in advertising something that wasn't fully formed yet. I wanted it to speak for itself. Funny how people never ask what you're working on when they assume you're a failure. Later that night, while Noreen was regaling my uncle with a story about her trip to Turks and Caicos, I slipped into the front yard and took a phone call. Marta was screaming on the other end, her voice shrill with disbelief. "They signed. It's done. 40 books. 40, Maeve. Do you understand what that means?" I didn't, not at first. Not until the wire transfer hit. Not until we started outsourcing and hiring and seeing money flow into the account faster than it went out. And not until I bought the car. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was clear. But somewhere along the way, the lines blurred. I had remembered a conversation from the year before. Noreen loudly complained at Christmas that Darian wouldn't let her lease an Audi Q5 under the business because she didn't technically run anything. "They said no proof of income," she scoffed. "Even with perfect credit. Total garbage." It was all performative outrage, of course. She had the money through Darian. But the denial wounded her ego. So when I saw a used Q5 on Darian's lot, dark navy, leather interior, less than 10K miles, I made a call. Used a portion of the business income under our LLC. Paperwork went through clean. Financing approved. I didn't need to lie. Everything was legal, transparent, and poetic. When I pulled up to my parents' house a month later for my dad's birthday, the car practically gleamed in the driveway. The second Noreen stepped outside and saw me step out of the driver's seat, something in her face shifted. Confusion. Shock. Maybe a little fear. Like the moment you realize the floor beneath you is no longer as stable as you thought. She walked up slowly, eyes scanning the car, then me. "That's a new car?" "Lease it," I said, casually. "Good deal." "Through your husband's place, actually." She blinked. "That's funny. I tried to get this exact one last year. They said I didn't qualify." I shrugged. "Business lease. New LLC. Contracts are flowing in." She didn't ask about the business. Didn't congratulate me. She just said, "Huh," and walked back toward the porch without another word. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of birthday cake, barbecue, and polite avoidance. Noreen barely spoke to me. Darian kept glancing at the car like he was trying to place how I got it. But he never asked. That night, I lay in bed at my parents' house staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it creak with every slow spin. It wasn't just about the car. It was about the first time in years that I felt like I had the upper hand, not out of spite, but because I had finally stopped waiting for anyone in that family to see my worth. And in doing so, I found it myself. The week after the birthday party, I started getting these vague, passive-aggressive texts from Noreen. She didn't reference the car directly, of course. That would be too honest. Some of us work hard for our money and don't need flashy things to feel valuable. It's sad how people change when they think they've made it. By the way, Darian said someone at the dealership used my name for a lease. Weird, right? I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She was reaching. Fishing for a reaction. But I'd spent years giving her my energy, defending myself against the ways she twisted reality to fit her version of me, the unstable one, the dreamer, the cautionary tale. Let her think whatever she needs to. The truth was, she wasn't entirely wrong. I had changed. The work Marta and I were doing wasn't just bringing in money, it was reshaping how I saw myself. For the first time in years, I was waking up early with purpose. We had weekly calls with writers from across the globe. I hired a virtual assistant. We started planning for our first indie author conference appearance. I was no longer someone scraping by. I was someone building. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the birthday party, I got a call from Darian. At first, I didn't recognize the number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. "Maeve," he said, the moment I answered. "Hey. Darian here." There was a long pause. Listen, I was going over lease activity for tax filing, and something came up. A vehicle under a business lease. Audi Q5. Financed through the company, under a new LLC. But the file lists Noreen Caldwell as an associated name on the business license? Ah. There it was. I didn't panic. I didn't lie. I told him the truth, that the LLC was legitimate, that Noreen Caldwell was a placeholder name we'd used while developing our privacy product for indie authors, and that there was no identity theft involved. All documentation was above board. The car was leased legally under a verified business entity. The end. He didn't argue. He just let out a long, audible sigh. "I figured," he said finally. "It's just. She's been on a warpath about it. Said someone was using her name to mock her. She's upset." Of course she was. After I hung up, I sat in silence. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even particularly satisfied. I just felt done. Noreen had built her whole personality around control, her house, her image, her carefully curated social circle. And for the first time, she didn't have a say in how I showed up. A week after the phone call with Darian, my parents invited both of us to dinner. Just the five of us, me, Noreen, Darian, and them. I knew it was a peacekeeping attempt, let's all just move past this kind of gathering. I wore jeans and a black blouse. Nothing fancy. Noreen showed up in heels and a silk scarf, like she was heading to a yacht party instead of her parents' two-story house in Lakewood. Dinner was baked salmon, roasted potatoes, and awkward silence. Every time I tried to speak, she interrupted. Corrected. Comment. I could feel my mom's eyes flick back and forth like a referee who didn't want to blow the whistle. At one point, she said, "You know, Maeve, it's fine if you want to play businesswoman for a while. But eventually the real world catches up. Freelance isn't real stability." I set my fork down. Not in anger. Just slowly. Deliberately. "I'm not playing at anything," I said. "You may not understand what I do, but that doesn't make it less valid." She looked like she wanted to respond, but Darian gave her a look. Not harsh, not controlling. Just tired. After dinner, while we were helping clear plates, my dad pulled me aside in the hallway. "I've seen what you've built," he said, quietly. "Your mom showed me your website. It's impressive. You should be proud." I felt that small rush of something warm behind my ribs. Validation. Maybe not everything I'd ever wanted, but something. He cleared his throat. "Noreen. She's loud when she's insecure. Always has been." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. When I got back to my place that night, the apartment felt different. Not because it had changed, but because I had. I sat in the living room with a mug of chamomile and scrolled through our company dashboard, watching the numbers climb, the feedback come in, the authors who were finding real success because of our help. Not that long ago, I thought I'd never get out of my marriage. I thought I'd always be dependent. Broken. One bad month away from calling my parents for help. Now, I was someone Noreen couldn't quite figure out how to categorize anymore. And that scared her more than anything. Because when you can't define someone, you can't control the narrative. And when you lose the narrative, well, things tend to unravel. It started subtly. A forwarded email from an old client. A strange message from an author Marta and I had never worked with. Then a vague one-star review on our website that didn't match any known customer records. At first, I assumed it was a coincidence. In any business, especially one that's growing fast, there's bound to be noise. But when Marta pulled me into a Zoom meeting looking both pissed and amused, I knew something was up. "You're not going to believe this," she said, leaning forward. "We just got an email from someone named Jay Caldwell. Says we're operating illegally, and that we've been misrepresenting who's involved in our company." I stared at the screen. "She attached screenshots from your personal Facebook. Photos from the reunion. A snapshot of your LinkedIn, even mentioning your sister by name, you're Noreen. She's trying to tie her to the LLC to make it look like we're using her identity." My heart sank a little, not out of fear, but exhaustion. Marta kept talking. "She clearly doesn't know what she's doing." The email was sent from a Gmail address, no real legal language, no citation of actual law. But still. What the hell? It was Noreen. Of course it was. She couldn't undo what had happened, but she could sow doubt. Muddy the waters. Try to reclaim control by stirring up chaos in a space she didn't even belong to. That was her go-to strategy. If I can't dominate the system, I'll discredit the people who operate it. I should have been angry. I should have called her, demanded an explanation, and fought back. But honestly, I didn't want to engage. I'd spent too many years letting her dictate my emotional weather. So I let Marta respond. Calm, professional, and pointed. "Thank you for your concern. Our company operates under all legal standards required by Washington state law. All names used for internal testing were clearly marked as fictitious, and no private or financial information was ever linked to any real person without consent. Please direct any further concerns to our legal team at email." And then we moved on. But Noreen didn't. A few days later, my mom called me while I was on a walk around Wright Park. "She's been crying," she said. "She says you've humiliated her. That people are asking why her sister's name is attached to a business she doesn't run." I stopped near the duck pond, watching two kids toss breadcrumbs into the water. "Mom," I said slowly, "her first name was used in a placeholder. That's it. She has no stake, no association, and frankly no right to claim she's been humiliated." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, gently, "Maeve. You know how she is." I did. That was the problem. For most of my life, the entire family operated on Noreen time. Her mood set the clock. Her opinions shaped reality. Her feelings, however erratic, were treated as gospel. And the rest of us bent around her like trees in a windstorm, convinced that was just the natural order of things. But now, I wasn't bending anymore. I saw my mom again the following weekend for coffee. We met at a cafe near Stadium High, her favorite place, partly for the scones, partly for the view. She looked tired. She kept stirring her tea without drinking it. "She says you used the car to mock her," my mom said. "She really believes you did it out of spite." I sipped my latte. "I did it because I needed a car. And I could finally afford a good one. That's all." "She's threatened," she whispered. "She's insecure," I corrected. "That's not the same thing." The truth was, Noreen wasn't used to being in a position where she wasn't the center of the family's attention. Her whole identity was built on being the one who made it, the example everyone else should follow. But when that image cracked, when someone else started rising up without asking her for approval, she panicked. I wasn't trying to compete with her. But she saw me existing confidently as competition. A few days later, my cousin Soraya texted me. She'd overheard Noreen at a brunch telling someone that I'd manipulated a leasing system using shady legal tactics, and that I was pretending to be successful online to make up for failing in real life. Soraya ended the text with, "She's obsessed with you right now. You're all she talks about." I stared at that message longer than I should have. Not because it surprised me, but because it made something click. This wasn't about the car. Or the business. Or even the placeholder name. It was about the fact that for once, I was living in a reality Noreen couldn't curate for me. And maybe she was terrified that if people saw me differently, capable, stable, thriving, they'd start questioning everything else she'd ever said about me. What surprised me most wasn't that Noreen was talking about me behind my back, that had become her favorite sport lately, but that she was starting to lose the room. Slowly, subtly, but surely. It came out in small ways. Soraya wasn't the only cousin who reached out. My cousin Lee, who rarely involved herself in family drama, sent me a DM on Instagram. "You've been quiet about all of this, and I respect that. I see what you're doing. Proud of you." Then there was Dorian, Noreen's godson, of all people, who asked me if I'd be open to helping his girlfriend self-publish a children's book. "I heard you're, like, the person to talk to now," he said, half laughing, half serious. The tides were shifting. People were noticing. Not in a flashy, look-at-me kind of way, but in that quiet, undeniable way success has when it's earned and not performed. I kept doing what I'd been doing, working, growing, helping authors find their voices. And all the while, Noreen kept spinning. She showed up at my parents' house unannounced one afternoon, while I happened to be there helping them reconfigure their home office. I'd just helped my mom clean out a closet when I heard the familiar click of heels on the hardwood. "Oh, you're here," she said, stopping in the doorway like she'd caught me committing some crime. "Didn't realize you were staying this long." I didn't rise to it. "Just helping Mom," I said. She wanted to reorganize. She walked past me without acknowledging it. Dropped her purse on the dining room table like she owned the place. "I brought lunch," she said. "Figured you guys would be too busy playing homemaker to remember to eat." My mom gave her a look. "That's not fair, Noreen. It's not wrong, she said, pulling out plastic containers with that same smug grace she used to unwrap birthday gifts she didn't like. We ate in mostly silence. My dad was in the garage, blissfully unaware. My mom tried to force polite conversation, but Noreen kept steering it into pointed territory. "How's your little company going?" she asked, stabbing at her pasta salad. "It's going well," I said. "We're expanding next quarter." "Must be exhausting," she said. "All that hustling. You know, not everyone's cut out for business ownership." I just looked at her. Not angry. Not even defensive. Just calm. "You're right," I said. "It's not for everyone." The silence that followed was heavier than anything she could have said. She was waiting for a fight. I wouldn't give it to her. Later that evening, my mom pulled me aside. "She's not used to being overshadowed," she said, as if confessing something she'd known a long time. "I'm not trying to overshadow her," I replied. "I know," she said. "But you're showing up in a way she never expected you to. And it's making her unravel." I wasn't sure what to say to that. My whole life, I'd been the cautionary tale, the sister with bad luck, the failed marriage, the unstable finances, the unfinished dreams. And now? I was just me. Whole. Capable. Finally on level ground. But for someone like Noreen, that was enough to feel threatened. A week later, Marta and I had our biggest meeting yet, a video pitch to a platform in Europe looking for a US editing and publishing partner. It was the kind of deal that could put us on the map internationally. We were nervous, overcaffeinated, and underslept. But we nailed it. At the end of the call, the client, a serious, stone-faced man from the Netherlands, smiled and said, "You two are a formidable team. I can tell you've both been underestimated." I laughed. Frequently. After the call, Marta leaned back in her chair, stretched, and said, "You know, I don't think you even realize how far you've come." I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I was still adjusting to the view. You don't realize how small you were living until you finally breathe in a space that lets you stretch. And for the first time, I was beginning to understand what it meant to live outside the version of me that Noreen, and honestly, even I, had clung to for so long. But peace, like success, doesn't come without backlash. Especially when the people around you are still invested in the old story. Noreen's unraveling didn't come all at once. No, it came in slow, embarrassing waves, the kind that take your breath away one humiliating inch at a time. And what made it worse was that she caused it. No hampered. No schemes. Just her own ego catching up to her. The turning point came during our cousin Mateo's engagement party in Snohomish. Beautiful venue, open barn, fairy lights strung between exposed beams, soft jazz playing in the background, and a guest list that leaned heavy into both sides of the extended family. It had been a while since the whole crew had been together, post-COVID, post-marriages, post-divorces, post-everything. I almost didn't go, but Mateo had always been kind to me, even when others weren't. He was one of the few people who saw past Noreen's stories and took the time to get to know the real me. So I showed up. Nothing flashy. Just me, a long rust-colored dress, flats, and a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, and maybe that's why people kept approaching me. "Maeve, I saw your company's website, incredible work. My friend said she took your publishing workshop and learned more in 1 hour than she did in 2 years. I heard you're working with European clients now." That's amazing. All of it was casual, organic, like little affirmations scattered throughout the evening. I thanked them, kept it humble, and didn't bring Noreen up once. She brought me up, though. Loudly. I mean, let's be real, I overheard her say to a few distant relatives near the bar. "Maeve's just writing some online trend. Ghostwriting romance novels for desperate women in their basements or something. It's not a real business. It's just content mills and clickbait ebooks." Someone cleared their throat. I didn't see who. But the group shifted awkwardly, and she trailed off. Later, during dinner, the mic was passed around for toasts and speeches. Mateo gave a sweet one to his fiancée. A few uncles cracked jokes. My dad stood and, unexpectedly, spoke. "I want to say something," he said, a little tipsy, but steady. "About growth. About how proud I am of the people in this family who've rebuilt themselves from nothing." Quietly. Without applause. Without a safety net. He glanced at me. "Some people take the easy road. Some take the hard road. And some forge their own." A pause. A few claps. My mother dabbed her eyes. Noreen looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. And then, the final blow came, not from me. Not from my dad. But from the universe itself, wearing a name tag that said Juliana. A woman I'd never met approached me near the bathroom line. Elegant, sharp, mid-30s. She introduced herself politely, then added, "I was your sister's friend. We did PTA together for a few years before I moved to Tacoma. She used to talk about you like you were this helpless little wreck." I blinked. "And then one day," she continued, smiling, "I saw your name on a webinar my husband's company sponsored. You were leading the presentation. And I thought, huh. That's the wreck my friend kept talking about?" She laughed gently. "You were brilliant." I remember thinking, either Noreen doesn't know her sister, or she doesn't want to. She touched my arm. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." That moment? That was it. That was the revenge. Not the car. Not the lease. Not the business. It was true. The slow dismantling of the fiction Noreen had built. Not by force, but by simply standing in who I'd become. And she knew. Because an hour later, as people started leaving, Noreen cornered me outside by the parking lot. "You think you've won or something?" she hissed. I stared at her, calm. "There's nothing to win. We were never in a race." She scoffed. "Everyone thinks you're this underdog story now. That you made it. But I know you. I know what you've been through." I met her gaze. "You don't," I said quietly. "You only know the version you need to believe. Because it made you feel better about your own choices." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her face shifted, not in anger this time, but in something closer to shame. Or maybe realization. She turned and walked away without another word. The last I heard, Noreen started pulling back from family events. Not out of spite, but because she couldn't control the narrative anymore. When the story no longer centers you, it gets harder to stay in the room. And me? I'm good. Still working with Marta. Still helping indie authors. Still building something I'm proud of, not because it proves anyone wrong, but because it feels right to me. And that Audi? I donated it to a nonprofit that helps women start over after divorce. Told them to pass it on to someone who really needs it. Turns out, the best revenge isn't what you drive. It's what you walk away from, and who you become after.